Welcome to the Shooting Times podcast, which is brought to you by Fieldsports Press. I'm joined this week by Simon Barr, the CEO of Fieldsports Press, who I believe has just come back from Iceland. Is that right, Simon?
I have, yes. My second trip this year. First was for the spring salmon run. Not that successful this year. I was a little bit early, but we had good success for some slightly later fish. And I also had the opportunity to go and hunt a reindeer, which was a great experience.
Have you told your young children that you were slaying reindeer?
I have actually. They seem pretty cool about it. They've grown up with that, so they've seen all sorts of weird and wonderful things come through the door at various points. So it's not something they're particularly bothered about.
Well, we might get onto that again later on in the episode. But this week we're focusing on really quite a lot of interesting news stories, as we always do in this podcast. We're focusing on the 30th of August issue, so it'll be with you on Wednesday on your doorstep. If you're not a subscriber already, we've got a very good subscription offer on at the moment, which comes with fully comprehensive insurance, the sort of thing that you need if you're going to be shooting this season, the sort of thing that everyone should have, actually, whether you go to shoots where you need it or not. That covers really everything you could possibly want, Simon, right? And
Yep.
competes with any other insurance out there.
Well, we're not trying to compete with any other insurance. We just think it's a great opportunity to get people a combined subscription and insurance offer. It takes you up to £2 million of public liability and covers shotgun, air rifle and rifle-based activities.
Yeah.
So it will cover you for any activity in the field from a public liability point of view.
But I think as a magazine, we are trying to compete with every other magazine out there, and we do lead the way, as we have done for over 140 years now.
Quite right, too.
While you were casting a fly into the cold Icelandic water, there were all sorts of things going on. The Scottish government announced that they are launching a 6-week consultation on a ban on snaring. Now, Wales, I think it was late June when they banned snaring, and Scotland always likes to feel that they're sort of keeping up when it comes to banning things. Simon, as you well know, as a person in Scotland, they really go in for banning things in Scotland.
Yes, and taxing us more as well.
It's a very easy PR win. Snaring really is up there with sort of, kicking your children in terms of things that people get upset about and feel that you definitely shouldn't do. I mean, actually, I was quite interested. So there was an anti-shooting group who said that 76% of people in Scotland support a ban on snaring. I have to say that I'm actually surprised that it's as low as that. I think if you walk down George Street or Princess Street, of course, Scotland's two great shopping streets, and you said to people, what do you think of snaring foxes? What do you reckon, Simon? I think it would go down pretty...
Yeah, I have to say there is quite a nucleus of field sports friendly people in Edinburgh as a city, but it's how you present a headline, and similarly with the trophy import ban, you can present it in such a way to get anybody to follow what you want them to, without the context, without science. And I think that's, it's playing to the crowd. It's a political win, as was the trophy import ban.
The trophy import ban, that's actually developed in the time you were away as well. And we'll go on to that. It's a really interesting one. But I think with snaring, it's one of those ones where, I spent a bit of time with a keeper a couple of years ago now, and he said to me, look, if we ban snaring, grey partridge conservation in this country would be very, very difficult. And his point was that basically when crops get up, you can't control foxes effectively because you just can't see them. You can't shoot through fields of wheat, but you can snare, and snares work 24 hours a day. You have to check them every morning, is best practice. And I think the other point, which is essential, is that snaring has changed an awful lot. So you had the sort of old-fashioned kind of Edwardian snares, and if you type in snaring into Google, you'll come up with some pretty horrific images. But just this morning, actually, we're recording this on a bank holiday Monday, and going onto the GWCT website on a bank holiday and watching videos of Mike Swan is the sort of thing that I like to do. I was watching him this morning explaining how far snares have come. So humane cable restraints, as they're now called, and that's not just sort of, a bluff. I mean, that's very much what they are. They have
positive hyperbole to suit a cause.
Yeah. No, I mean, they really genuinely are. So they have two swivels. You can sort of move within them if you're a fox caught in one. And they also actually have a breakaway device. So if a badger or something which is much stronger than a fox gets stuck in one, then it can pull its way out. And then they're free running as well. So what's really interesting is that when the GWCT use these snares to catch foxes and they put radio collars on them, they find that sort of a year or 2 years later, they're catching the same fox in a snare. So what they've deduced from this is that the fox isn't left with sort of trauma and this great fear of snares in the way that people might suppose, which is really interesting. I hadn't thought about that at all.
But what do you think the outcome will be of the
it'll be a ban
6
on
week?
snaring. There'll be a ban on snaring, and I would just like to put it to those who are sort of agitating for a ban on snaring. I think if you said to them, tell me about the difference between old-fashioned snares and humane cable restraints, I think they would look at you as though they had no idea what you're talking about. It's one of those ones where really people need to understand before they take a view on it. And that leads us on, I think, very interestingly to Therese Coffey, saying that ministers are working hard to pass a law banning the import of animal trophies. I was wondering, Simon, are you going to be bringing your reindeer back with you? Did you bring your reindeer back with you?
No, I didn't. It wouldn't. It's not a CITES listed species, so under the current laws, I would be able to bring it back.
Oh, really?
Ship it back.
Yeah.
There would be no restriction, but under the proposed trophy import ban, it would be something I wouldn't be able to do.
And tell me, I've not ever had a trophy on my hands, but what's the if you listen to the news, or rather if you go on social media, you're told that it's all men with small genitalia who want to bring back the heads of buffaloes. We perhaps won't get into that, but what is the appeal when it comes to trophies as somebody who has hunted various species that would be affected?
What is the appeal of trophy hunting? That is a very far-reaching philosophical question, which is probably a whole podcast in itself. But what I think we should talk about is the benefit of trophy hunting,
which is huge.
And it's scientifically proven to put a huge amount of income into places and value on the animals' heads, which provides vital conservation projects, anti-poaching, monitoring. Local people get cash from the trophy hunters coming to whichever country it is. Very often they are building schools, wells. I've been involved in hunted all over the world and seen some amazing projects which have been solely funded through animals being shot. It's always mature males. They're always past breeding age. A trophy hunter will want to shoot something typically with larger horns, larger antlers, and those are the animals that aren't necessarily part of the breeding herd anymore, and therefore there's a surplus, and if that surplus can provide vital income to put value on those animals that are left, it can only be a good thing. And it was both parties voted to ban trophies, and I think it's got stuck in the Lords because the Lords have turned around and said, hang on a minute, there's no science backing up this.
I think they've also said it's poorly written legislation. But I was watching a very interesting video a while ago of students at the University of Windhoek, so in Namibia, young Namibians saying that it should be up to the people of Namibia how they want to manage their wildlife. It shouldn't be dictated to them, which is really interesting.
It's a sort of postmodern colonialism. We are telling people how they should be managing their wildlife. Yeah,
it's the sort of sensibilities of people over here being privileged over the lives and livelihoods of people over there, and being privileged over the conservation success or otherwise.
And there's a wildlife management piece as well. There are no predators in Iceland, where I just was, as there are none in that are big enough to kill red deer. They need to be managed, and in order to have a healthy herd, you need to manage selectively to do that. If someone that wants to be part of the selection process wants to keep the horns, stick them on their wall, have a rug, eat the meat, and it provides a benefit to the flora and fauna wherever the species is that they've hunted it. What's not to like? Of course, what's not to like is shooting the cast of the Lion King is quite an emotive topic, even if it does good for the rest of the population. So I completely, there's very few people that big game hunt outside of the UK now.
Can you just answer one vaguely philosophical point just before we move on to Scottish water and kind of bring it all back home, which is that you always see it said that people like to hunt because it makes them feel big and powerful. And I actually think, shooting things like snipe or woodcock, here makes you realise that in many ways you're inferior to these things that you're hunting. They have a better sense of sort of wild places than you do. How does that figure when you go over to somewhere like Iceland? Do you come back feeling kind of small and know as though the world is this massive place and you're just a tiny, tiny part of it? How does that work?
I mean, look, it's for me personally, it's about the experience. I've hunted all over the world, and it's taken me to some remarkable places that I wouldn't have visited had I not been going there to hunt. The trigger pull is a tiny, tiny part of a 1 week trip. It might be a 2 week trip. I went to the Himalayas for 21 days and pulled the trigger twice, which actually represents a very small part of it. But I had a 21 sized group of Sherpas following, all being paid by me to come and support the hunt, and the opportunity to do things like that. It's adventure. It is getting out into the wilds and going and reconnecting with things that we evolved to do. And again, it's such a big philosophical topic. I don't have a huge amount of trophies on my wall, but they are representative of the experience. So when I look at something that's on my wall, it reminds me of the amazing experience and the amazing place and the amazing other wildlife I saw when I was there. So it's does it make me feel big or small? I'd
just the same size.
Never considered it that way. But I feel better travelled, and I feel as though I've had significantly better travel. I've had some really amazing natural experiences in the wild, and I think that's what draws me to it. Is the overall experience, not just pulling the trigger, because you can do that on a clay pigeon or on a paper target. So,
well, if you can get Therese Coffey, who's head of DEFRA, to go with you on your next adventure, we will definitely run a long feature on it, possibly even 7 pages.
I don't think she'd make it up the hills in Iceland. It was quite arduous, so we'll see.
Well, we'll see. We can ask her. Closer to home, Scottish Water have followed United Utilities in saying that they are going to launch a consultation, which is slightly more grown up than what United Utilities said, about grouse shooting on their ground. It then emerged that they've actually only got one grouse shooting license on their ground. It's interesting that they followed suit and that they're going to do that.
This is in the PR topic more than anything.
Exactly. And good PR versus bad PR. I mean, the consultation is probably the right way to do it, rather than just saying, that's it, all out ban. The fact that they've sort of said it, but they've only got one person who's affected. And I believe that person actually has this license because they sold an estate, had a bit of ground that butted onto it. So it's not it's a relatively small area. You probably know the Angus Glens quite well. You were up not far from there the other day?
Yeah,
which is where this bit of ground
actually,
is.
I'm a Purdy Award judge, and I was with D Ward.
Really?
Yeah, he was part of it last year, and came second, I believe, in the Purdy Awards.
Yes, that is right.
And so, yes, I visited him there, and what he does there is phenomenal for conservation and biodiversity. It's a masterclass, really, in the Angus Glens. It was amazing to see all the projects and things that.
He's done a lot there for black grouse, I think, and waders. He's very into, and he said actually to us that he worries that the abundant wader populations will not be looked after if this grouse shooting license is withdrawn. And you've got places like Glenprosen, which was one of the big estates there, bigger than the amount of ground there.
Was it recently sold, wasn't it?
It was sold to Forestry and Land Scotland, which is the new name for Forestry Commission Scotland, and that's 16,500 acres.
And it was a fabulous grouse moor, and there was
a huge, one of the sort of great. And the plan is reportedly to cover it in trees, so that's going to be something that we watch quite
flatten the deer. That's
Yeah, it could be a dead zone. They could plant it responsibly. They could put the right trees in the right places, but we will definitely watch that with interest. So there was another thing. I know, Simon, that you're very keen on flying a drone. Is that?
Yeah, I think they help to create fabulous pictures for the magazines. We only use in the UK drones under 250 grams.
Really?
Legal requirement. Yeah, there's a legal requirement.
Why is that? Because if they hit someone, they can cause...
There's various different civil aviation authority like you to have licenses if you're using it commercially above a weight of 250 grams. So, of course, anything we ever use is 249 grams. But they are, to think of some of the stuff we've been able to capture for content for magazines and for video. 10 years ago, it would have been a helicopter, and now we can do it with a drone that's no bigger than an iPhone, frankly.
I'm amazed they use helicopters at all, actually, anymore, if you think what drones can do. But there was a news story last week that an Edinburgh-based conservation consultancy, or ecology consultancy, rather, is now using drones to work out how many deer there are on a bit of ground, and also boar as well, which is a really interesting thing. I think up on Lewis, actually, last year on Lewis and Harris, or possibly 2 years ago now, they did a big study across the island that was using helicopters, hugely expensive. But they found that there were people who really were pretty far out in terms of the number of deer they thought they had. So some people had far more deer than they thought, and others had far less deer than they thought. But it's just interesting the way that technology is changing. Something as traditional in a sense as deer management.
Yeah, I think drones are fantastic and relatively inexpensive compared to a helicopter. You could have an operator or a series of operators with drones to go and do a deer survey, probably in a quicker period of time than you would with a helicopter, and for far less. So, it's using.
And if you crash the drone, it's not as much of an issue as if you're, sitting there in your helicopter.
Yeah, well, let's hope there aren't any helicopter crashes on deer counts. That's all we need.
I was very interested. We got Owen Williams to write a story for us. Owen Williams is a very good artist, a real enthusiast in terms of woodcock conservation. He does an awful lot for woodcock conservation, but he also is the president of the GWCT in Wales. And the Welsh Game Fair has gone from strength to strength. Last year, I managed to drive to the old site of the Welsh Game Fair, actually, rather than the new site. And I had 20 minutes before I was meant to get on stage, and I got there and I thought, this is really quiet. And I did a little bit of Googling, and I realised I was actually at the other end of the country entirely. But I have a plan to be back there this year, and I sort of, hopefully I won't make that same mistake again.
It is at a different location, by the way. So,
is it?
Yeah, so just make sure you put the right postcode into your sat nav before you set off.
But Owen Williams was saying in this week's issue that he's really struggled to get Welsh politicians to engage with the Game Fair. And the crazy thing in Wales is that they've got a very rural population. Historically, they had a lot of hunting that went on. They had a lot of fishing that went on. They had a lot of woodcock shooting that went on. But he hasn't managed to get Welsh politicians to say they'll come. And if you go to the Game Fair here, you see a lot of politicians there. The Attorney General was there. Therese Coffey didn't turn up, which was very disappointing at the Game Fair at Ragley Hall. But he was saying, more than ever, they need Welsh politicians to engage with rural Wales. And of course, this comes not long after Mark Drakeford said that the Welsh government does not support shooting for sport. But when it comes to selling game meat, that's a different issue. How you have the latter without the former is...
unless they start to farm game birds like poultry.
Farm partridges, yeah.
And you remove the shooting element to it, which...
Yeah, you remove a very important business for people in rural areas.
Quite right.
But so hopefully they'll... he'll manage to make some headway with that, but the fact he hasn't, it's good to shine a light on that. We have a series, Simon, that we run in Shooting Times, which is called 100 Years of Keepering. So we have two keepers who write that for us. Dave Whitby is one of them, and then Lawrence Catlow is the other. Both sort of real veteran keepers, very much respected within the keeping community, and quite outspoken guys. So they write about everything. How the role of the gamekeeper's wife has changed is quite interesting. All the gamekeepers' husband, actually, you have got a few gamekeepers now who are women, but also trapping and so on. But Dave Whitby has written this week about who would want to be a gamekeeper now, and it looks at the challenges that keepers face. I mean, it was really interesting. So in 1851 in England and Wales, there were 7,500 gamekeepers, and in 1911 there were 1,200 gamekeepers in Norfolk alone, which is crazy. You now have just 3,000 full-time gamekeepers in England and Wales, and he was saying, legislative reforms will doubtless be harsh, and we will see a future of restricted rearing, restricted releasing, and possibly even restrictions on bag sizes. He thinks we might see. So he says, who would want to be a keeper now? But he thinks that actually it is a profession that will have a future, and it will just be something that evolves. I was very interested to talk to Dylan Williams at the Game Fair, who's set a business up now, which identifies conservation jobs and finds gamekeepers who can do those while still doing bits of keeping.
And I've actually had interesting conversations with Dylan. Is the word gamekeeper fit for the modern era? Should it be wildlife manager? Should it be conservation manager?
Officer.
Should it be something other? Because actually, most of the time, the gamekeeping element is quite minimal. There's so much other activities that are part of the role. that perhaps that sort of Edwardian gamekeeper persona is something that is from a bygone era, and now it is more about getting your necessary licenses to be able to operate whichever piece of machinery, going and studying and understanding all of the different aspects of the day-to-day job, which they have to do. Modern gamekeepers have to do that. So, is the name gamekeeper selling the role short, perhaps?
I think there's also another really interesting point, which is that when landowners and farmers are trying to meet sort of conservation objectives with things like elms and so on, they need people to do things for them. They need people to lay hedges. They need people to dig up ponds. They need people to restore wetland. And you don't just have kind of old people knocking around anymore in the way that, people once did, an old boy who could do a bit of hedge laying or whatever, or even actually young people who could do a bit of hedge laying for you. So, there are a few gamekeepers I know who unfortunately have lost their job as gamekeepers and have become sort of conservation professionals, which is really interesting. And I wonder whether we're going to have kind of, as you alluded to, dual roles where people are keeping, and even keeping perhaps in a slightly more old-fashioned sense of the word. So wild bird keeping, while also sort of doing the heavy lifting when it comes to meeting conservation targets. So I think it'll be really interesting to keep in touch with Dylan on that, on his new venture.
Yeah.
So Simon, I remember the first decent knife I ever had was an Opinel, which is sort of like 15 quid or whatever. But actually, they're very good for what they are. I don't know, what do you like to use in terms of knives?
I've got a collection of nice knives, which I wouldn't want to use because they're too nice to use. But my preferred knife of choice is a Scandinavian knife called a Mora knife. They come in a injection molded high-vis orange scabbard sheath, and the handle is bright orange. So if you put it down on the grass, you don't lose it.
On the grass, you find, because it's one of those things that we all need. Whether you're fishing or stalking, or even whether you're out shooting rabbits, of an evening and you want to paunch rabbits in the field. And one of the things that I really like about ST is that we get people to review kit who really know their stuff. And I always say that with reviews, I quite often get a call on Thursday from a manufacturer who says to me, "I've read your review of our latest coat, and frankly, I'm furious." And I say to them, "Well, I'm really glad, because when we say nice things about your product, it only actually means anything when we also say when we thought it was a load of crap." And this week we've got Graham Downing, who's stalked for a hell of a long time and actually sells venison at his local market. So he's really sort of there using a knife day in, day out, reviewing mid-priced knives. And you can spend a huge amount.
He's the right person for a knife review, without question.
Exactly, he is without a doubt the right person for a knife review. And we've got Richard Negus, who reviews boots and sort of wears them day in, day out, and goes out with his cousin on a fishing boat to test how good jackets are when they claim to be waterproof. His cousin's a fisherman in Lowestoft, so he's the man who does that for us. And Graham Downing is the knife review man. So I think it's really interesting. I mean, he says for sort of like 55 quid, you can get something that's very, very good. So I like the idea that readers of ST read our reviews, read our rifle reviews, read our kit reviews, read our boot reviews, and come away knowing sort of how to spend their money wisely.
And I think we're very lucky on the ST to have such a stable of veteran countrymen and women who are able to use their experience, be sent products, and give an honest opinion about whether they think it's fit for purpose or not. And I think that's something the ST's been doing for a very long time, and people trust it for honest reviews, which I think is really important.
It's amazing how much Scandinavian kit we now use in this country. I mean, the knives we use, a lot of that stuff. And I have to say, as you'll have done, you go to Scandinavia, you experience the climate, you experience the conditions, you experience the lifestyle, and you realise why their kit is so good. I remember a couple of years ago, I got invited there to hunt moose. It was November, and I kind of packed in a rush, and I grabbed some stuff from my cupboard, like a little pair of tweed breeks, a shirt, a woolly jumper, and I was off. And it's about -9 when we were there. really miserable experience.
A rude awakening to Scandinavia.
Yeah. So that Graham Downing piece is great, and also actually just the rifle reviews that we have, sort of. Bruce Potts on his rifle reviewing, it's remarkable.
He's been reviewing rifles for the ST for a very long time. In fact, to ask him when was his first review, I remember when Selena worked at the mag nearly 20 years ago now. He was the de facto rifle reviewer, and what Bruce said went. He's got a major following, and he's highly, highly respected in the world of rifles. And we're very lucky to have him still writing for us. and putting out reviews very regularly for us. So Bruce is the man when it comes to rifles. I've bought 1 or 2 rifles off the back of reviews that he's done, actually.
Well, I quite often, it's funny, isn't it? The power of magazines. I quite often read stuff from Fieldsports Journal and then end up buying, I think a pair of Brand Lacoste boots was the last thing I bought as a result of an advert in Fieldsports Journal. It's something about, I don't know. I mean, I do really believe this, that when you're reading a magazine, you're in a buying mood. You know, when you're sitting on the back of a bus, I'm not sure how often you sit on the back of buses. I actually don't sit on the back of buses that often. Well, yeah, exactly. You're sitting on the back of a gun bus, you see an advert. No, but you know what I mean? I do think people are in a buying mood when they read magazines.
Yeah. And you know, we sell our content through our magazines, and there's a lot of free content online. But that's from, if you like, not tried and tested sources. Bruce Potts has been doing it for 20 plus years, and people know that his reviews have credibility, and we pay him for the stuff he does for us. It's not free online content. This is stuff that is high quality, and I guess that's why people want to buy magazines from us, because the content's high quality, including the reviews, things that people can trust. So I think that's really
and
important.
Also, I mean, Ed Coles, who's our car reviewer, right? He's a part-time mechanic, part-time gamekeeper. And like whatever we give him, he really, really so if we give him a Porsche Cayenne or whatever, as we have done, he takes it out when he's feeding his pheasants. He really gives it a proper doing and tells us how he got on with it. And I think it's terrific, because of course anybody can go online and read like a Porsche Cayenne review, but it's not really written by somebody who's actually living the same life that you're living. So that's I think that's a lot of fun. I'm trying to get him a Lamborghini at the moment to take around on his feed round.
They might not like that too much, but I think we have had a car review, their sports utility vehicle that they launched a couple of years ago. We have had, I think,
we gave him a G-Wagon not long ago. He said it was his fastest feed round yet. I don't know, how is it feeling autumnal with you, Simon, in Edinburgh?
I mean, the weather in Edinburgh has been awful. I know it's been pretty bad across the UK. It's been pitiful. The Edinburgh Festival's just finished, and I feel very sorry for them all, actually, because it's been grey and wet every single day. So watching the tattoo would have been quite bracing, I would imagine, up on the ramparts of the castle. It's been rough. I wouldn't say autumn's really kicked on here yet, I guess because it's been so wet. Everything's still very green. It hasn't been sun bleached, so maybe leaves will drop a bit later. But
I do feel like I really like this time of year when you get that sort of first autumn light, because it means that we're going to start looking at our shoot reports for the season ahead. We've got all sorts of things. We've got the walked up snipe stuff. We've got some late walked up grouse stuff. We're sending some people up to the Hebrides to do various things up there, and that's always really good fun, just trying to find these interesting stories, people kind of doing things on the fringes, things that are a bit different. And I think actually increasingly the things that people really want to do, if you talk to people now who are selling grouse over pointers or whatever, they will say to you, those days just sell, super quick.
I had a magnificent walk up on the 12th. I think last time I was on, I talked about it, but it was absolutely amazing. And for me, some of the best sport that I can have. It was magnificent, really special day, good company, sporting birds. They were fast. The weather was horrendous, but the birds got up really well, far enough ahead that they were shootable, but not so far ahead that it was difficult to get after them. So no, it was amazing, and I love a physical day, getting out there and going and doing things. So, and I think as the backdrop changes, and we know of so many changes that appear to be coming, those days are going to become more and more important, and it might be that those are the days that are available moving forward, that don't have any restrictions on them.
I think it's really interesting as well in terms of wild game, and sort of making sure that people understand that the ability to shoot wild game only happens as a result of conservation. At the Woodcock Club dinner this year, we've got Tim Bonner speaking, and I want to put it to him: how can we ensure that people are able to carry on shooting things like snipe, carry on shooting things like woodcock? And I don't mean overshooting them. I mean, how can we fight for people's ability to conserve these species, to create habitat for these species, and then to harvest a sustainable surplus of these species. So that should be a really interesting conversation.
And just remind me, what's the date of that? Are there tickets still available?
That is the 14th of September.
14th of September. And I think you can
if there's anybody listening to this who's a member, we would love to see you there. There aren't many tickets left, actually. And we're also very much looking forward to launching our Shooting Times Woodcock Club Awards, which will reward woodcock conservation. So hands-on creating habitat for woodcock. We want to see the results, we want to hear about the results, and then we will hand out the award at the Woodcock Club every year.
And Patrick, just interestingly, if I were to take a sort of counterpoint to the Woodcock Club, how would one defend the Woodcock Club in this era of wanting to not shoot woodcock, which seems to be many shoots now, will choose not to shoot woodcock? How do we place the Woodcock Club?
Well, I think the thing is if you're shooting woodcock week in, week out at a driven shoot, and it's the same bit of land, give or take, then you are disturbing the woodcock that are there. It doesn't take the world's greatest ecologist to realize when the woodcock have come in. So you don't shoot woodcock from the start of the season. Maybe you even just shoot woodcock after Christmas. But if you go up to the Isle of Lewis or whatever, when the woodcock have come in. The notion that resident woodcock are being shot out places like that just doesn't make. If you've got resident woodcock and you've got resident woodcock, well then that's probably a different thing, right? But if you actually look at the science, and that's what we're always told to do, right? Look at the science. There isn't evidence to support the idea that people shooting walked up woodcock is having any impact on the resident woodcock population in this country. And it's also, it's very interesting. If you really read into it, there's a lot of thought that woodcock actually weren't resident here until they started to leave blocks of woodland in East Anglia for driven pheasant shooting. So, we're always told, it's those who shoot that are causing a decline in woodcock. Well, actually, perhaps historically, it was those who shot who caused woodcock to stay here. They created this population. And, I've sat there with people whose careers are built on making noise in terms of the decline of species, right? In terms of sort of conservation woes. And they always want to talk about woodcock shooting. They always say we should ban woodcock shooting. They know it's a divisive issue. They know it gets people's backs up. But the fact is that an ill wind over the sea could kill more woodcock when they're migrating than, I as a sort of, mid-tier shot would ever be able to shoot in my life as somebody who shoots woodcock. So I think, we have to look at the science, right? And almost everything we've spoken about today, snaring, trophy hunting, and now woodcock shooting, look at the science. Yeah. Don't just sort of, go with kind of public will, because often public will or rather public feeling isn't right. And more than that, politicians and sort of celeb conservationists should not use these issues to try and create support, and to try and create a splash, because to do so is just deeply, deeply wrong. And you have to say often with these politicians or with these conservation celebs, are they ignorant or do they actually understand the issue? And they're just sort of exploiting public ignorance. And either of those answers are not happy ones.
Just playing to the crowd, I guess.
Yeah, it's shocking.
Trophy imports, there's such a small number of people that take part in big game hunting internationally. I guess it's an easy win, and it's an easy thing for both parties to have a sort of, I guess, feel-good factor with their constituencies around, because they can paint a sort of pretty negative backdrop about it. But actually, no science was looked at all. And in fact, lies were used. Science that was flawed or fabricated was used to build the case to put their bill through, which it went through. Yeah. But the Lords are having a look at it in scrutinising it on the basis of science. So it's not done yet.
But the woodcock one's really interesting, and it's become a very popular thing among people who shoot to say, I don't shoot woodcock anymore. They probably often didn't actually shoot that many woodcock in the first place.
How many shoots have you turned up on and they say we don't shoot woodcock on this shoot? It's frequent for me. Yeah,
I guess that's mainly driven shoots and sort of where they're shooting quite often. I don't shoot at those sorts of places that often. I quite often go to places to shoot woodcock, and they will say there, interestingly, we don't shoot woodcock here apart from 2 days in January, and this is one of those days. That's why we've gone. I was talking to a guy the other day, actually, who's a very keen member of the Woodcock Club, and he shot woodcock in the New Forest for a very long time, and he got a call, I think, last year to say that the New Forest were sort of saying no more woodcock shooting. And he spoke to a guy who works for the New Forest, and the guy said, well, look, you can't shoot woodcock anymore, but why don't you shoot squirrels? So loads of squirrels. Why don't you take your spaniels out and shoot squirrels? Because I don't want to shoot squirrels. I don't eat squirrels. I don't, my spaniel. What would they do? Like, how would the spaniels work the squirrels? And he said it just became clear that this guy had no knowledge at all. And really, he thinks at the heart of it, the New Forest was just worried that there was going to be a headline, New Forest endorse, the shooting of red listed species or whatever.
And there's a resident of the New Forest that we both know that's quite vociferous about woodcock shooting.
Yeah. I mean, who's spoken to me? He said, "Why don't we work together on a ban on woodcock shooting?" And I said to him, "Why don't we work together on a campaign for more turtle dove habitat on shoots?" And to this day, I'm yet to hear back from the guy on that. So I think that was a little too close to something that might bring people together, right? And that's not in at the moment. So
yeah,
no, we need more love. We need things that are going to bring people together.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think that probably brings us to the end of this week's podcast. By the time we chat again, Simon, I think probably in a couple of weeks' time, I'm very keen to get some of the rest of the team on. The wildfowling season will have started, and I always think that the wildfowling season is kind of, it's like Christmas for Shooting Times readers. Lots of them go out and don't actually shoot anything because there's not much to shoot, but it's the getting out and being there. It's being there as the sun comes up, or indeed as the sun goes down. I think marshes and saltings are just wonderful places to be. I'm very much looking forward to getting out there this season. If you're not already a subscriber to Shooting Times, do take advantage of our current subscription offer, which will be in the show notes. I think staying informed at the moment is more important than ever. And actually, there are a lot of things that we all should be voting on. We're not going to tell you how to vote or how to think, but the consultation on snaring is coming up. Putting your thoughts in there is really important. There's various things going on in terms of changing firearms legislation. It's very important that our voices are heard and that these things don't just pass us by.
One thing want to add, Patrick, is this is the third episode of the Shooting Times podcast, and I have to say the feedback so far has been very, very positive. And if there's anybody listening to this that would like to give us any feedback or any comments on things that they would like being covered on future shows, then do let us know. It's available on YouTube and on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, all of which have the opportunity to put comments, and we would welcome them. As we do welcome letters in the magazine and emails in the magazine. So please do get in touch if there's other things you'd like to hear or see on the podcast.
We always love people getting in touch. I have terrific friendships which started with somebody sending me a letter that they really hated this that I'd written or that I'd written, and I often end up calling them up and we have a long conversation and stay in touch for a long time. So for better or for worse, get in touch. Whether you love it or not, get in touch. That brings us to the end of the Shooting Times podcast, which has been brought to you by Fieldsports Press. I'm Patrick Galbraith, the managing editor of Fieldsports Press, and I've been joined by the CEO of Fieldsports Press, Simon Barr. Thank you.